Hello, everybody. I'm Pamela Engstrom, Director of Communications for Global Wealth Advisors. And we're going to get this webinar kicked off, and I'm going to hand it over to Tom Kennedy. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Pamela, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for taking the time on a Friday afternoon. We appreciate it. First off, I'd like to thank Pamela. She does a lot of work behind the scenes. If I listed all the things that she did for our firm, we'd be here for 3 hours. So take my word for it. Thank her. She set all this up. I also see a lot of familiar names on the attendee list. So I want to thank you on behalf of myself and Global Wealth, all of our clients out there, for the support in business. We appreciate it. I see some unfamiliar names as well. So for those of you that are not familiar with us, check out our website at gwadvisors.net. There you can find all the info, contact info, what we do, our processes. So if you want to reach out and get some more information from us, please feel free to go on to there. Two things. We just started doing these virtual webinars. We did one last month. It was in regards to Alzheimer's, and we had a good turnout. We had good feedback. So if there's anything you'd like to see or any topics you want us to talk about in the future, feel free to give us feedback. We'd appreciate it, and let us know what topics you're interested in. We also have one next month. I believe it is on June 26th. It's in regards to technology, big ideas, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, big in the healthcare sector, which, as everything that's going on right now with the pandemic, it should be really good. So June 26th will be our next webinar. Also, selfishly, I want to do a quick commercial. I run a podcast for Global Wealth, so please check out the podcast. It's every other Friday for 30 minutes. We get speakers in different industries that are specific to what we're talking about. They're the experts in that field, and it's everything and anything financially related, market updates, different products and strategies. The last one was actually last Friday. We actually had Pamela on to talk about branding. So feel free to check that out. It's called Your Money Momentum. It's on iTunes and Spotify. You can also go to our website to check it out as well. So done with the commercials. Let me, before I formally introduce our speaker, Chris, as a way of an agenda, we are going to do about a 25 to 30-minute presentation on 529s. Hopefully, the idea and the goal is to have you more educated than you were before the presentation. Hopefully, you get something out of it. Then I will hand it over to Kevin, my colleague. He's going to field the questions. On the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button. During the presentation, or if you want to wait till after, you can ask questions. Either way, at the end, we're going to present the questions to Chris to answer any comments that you have, and then I'll end with some closing remarks. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest speaker for today, Chris Stack. Chris is a managing consultant for savingforcollege.com. He is nationally recognized as an expert in 529 plans. As a partner in a major New York law firm, he was a very, very big advocate for these 529 plans early on, back in the late 90s, not only for his home state of New York, but also for other states. Translated, he is the 529 man. His nickname is Mr. 529. So he knows more about 529 plans than anyone else out there. With that, Chris, I want to thank you. I want to thank one of our sponsors, Columbia Threadneedle. They are an asset manager that we use. We also use their 529 plan a lot for many reasons, which we can talk about offline. But with that, Chris, thank you again, and the floor is all yours.
Thanks very much, Tom. So again, happy to be here. I have chosen to focus on this topic as my career. So hopefully I'll be able to share something with you based on my more than 20 years dealing with 529 investment plans. So I just want to start off by saying that most folks refer to these as you see in the bottom left column, 529 college savings plans. And I want to point out they are 529 plans named after that section in the code, but they are not obligated to be used for college. They are not a savings account, right? I don't need Tom to open up a savings account. I can do that at the bank. This is an investment account. And so I need a good financial advisor to help me navigate the financial markets and help me use investments to achieve my goals. And they're certainly not the kid's college savings plan because, as we'll see, the kid really doesn't have too much of a say or role in this. So here's our agenda for our discussion here. We'll quickly go through it so we have enough time for questions. But there are many benefits to 529 plans, and in my opinion, very much outweigh any negatives that you can come up with. There are many reasons why this should be a priority. Studies have shown that kids get older, and because kids get older, they're going to be approaching college age much faster than we're ready. And every child needs an education. And so we need to prepare for that, paying for that education for the most part. And we can either plan to do so for that inevitable reality or fail to plan. And that's just going to cost us so much more that it really doesn't make sense to not do it. Want to quickly address how most people think they'll deal with these increased costs, and that's through financial aid. There are two basic types of financial aid. There's merit aid and there's needs-based aid. So if you're all county third baseman or valedictorian, that school will give you a scholarship or a grant to induce you to go there, okay? And that's a wonderful thing, but it's a great minority of those who get very significant or full rides to a school. Most of us are relying on needs-based aid, okay? And that is, as we'll see, the source of funding for most financial aid packages, but very few people realize that as much as a third or half of the financial aid package consists of loans. And when we factor in the interest on those loans, we end up actually doing paying a lot more than we would have initially. So when we look at the financial aid formula, the FAFSA formula, we see that the biggest factor really is parental income, okay? And a 529 account is an asset that would be considered, but the maximum weighting is a little over 5.5%. So if I had a $100,000 529, this formula says we expect to use 5,600 of that in the upcoming academic year. So the 529 plans are treated as an asset of the owner, okay? And so this asset is not treated or considered at all if it is owned by the grandparent or the uncle or the aunt. And so it's important to know that 529 accounts for needs-based financial aid are treated the same as any other asset, whether it's your checking account, your taxable brokerage account, or what have you, okay? And second of all, when it's considered, it has a de minimis weighting on the overall award that's finally determined. Now, if we have a custodial account, assets in the student's name, that would give a 20% weighting. But a little trick that you can deal with if you did find yourself with a custodial account or the student did when applying is to take that and invest it in a 529, and that goes back down to the 5.64%. So I think the basic point we want you to take away from this is you are not penalized for having a 529 when pursuing financial aid. For merit aid, they don't care whether you have $1 or 100 million. For needs-based aid, this is hardly a major factor. Certainly pales in comparison to parental income or student income and assets. So as we said, student loans are a big factor, big component of the financial aid. And that's why for those that don't take the time to plan and prepare, those who are not joining us this afternoon, for example, okay, they're caught off guard. And so they're turning to borrowing. And that's why we have in this country over $1.5 trillion of outstanding student debt, 1.5 trillion. You know, for many of us, the proposition is we can start paying into education account, right? Let's say as late as starting when the child is 12 years of age and going all the way through senior year of high school. That would be 10 years. Or we could wait until they're in college and start paying back loans for 10 years. And you'll see that that monthly payment by paying the loans where you're paying interest as opposed to starting earlier where you're earning interest, that monthly payment can be as much as 4 times higher because of the wait. So if you think maybe your child is not going to get older, or maybe they'll run away from home, or there will be some other situation where you don't have to deal with these costs, then by all means, don't open up a 529. If you think it's more than likely and you want to do yourself a favor and reduce the stress and anxiety, then open up a 529. Time is your biggest ally, your biggest friend, and you really want to start. The only thing better than starting today is starting last year. So how might 529 plan offer a solution? They offer 4 major components to being advantageous. One is the tax advantages. The second is flexibility. Most people don't understand how flexible they are. Most importantly, control. And lastly, gift and estate tax benefits. So I think it's very important, again, to get this notion that 529s are kids' college savings account. We're not talking to kids here this afternoon. We're talking to you, presumably grown up, and it is the grown-ups who need to have full control over their money, and that's exactly what they do with the 529 account. Because while it's difficult for Tom and his colleague to predict the financial markets, it's much more difficult for you or any parent to predict how a kid will turn out, and that's why it's absolutely necessary to be in control and being able to react to the circumstances that we cannot forecast or predict. So let's take a quick look at what 529 actually offers us as the grown-up, the account owner. Well, it offers us what many will describe as the most powerful tool for investing, tax-free compounding. We're earning on our earnings instead of paying taxes on our earnings. As a result, our wealth, our savings grow a whole lot more. So a 529 account grows free of federal, and you have fortunately no state income tax in Texas, but it grows free of taxes. If you have a grandparent that lives in a different state, this would be true for them. We can then spend what we've earned without paying a nickel in taxes when used for educational expenses. And what that means is we would have to earn a whole lot more in something else to have us end up in the same net position, net of taxes. And so we don't need to do that. We don't need to pursue more risky investments to hope to get more returns on our account. We can simply skip the whole tax equation by participating in a 529 account. And we can spend it tax-free for most technical college, trade school. We can spend it tax-free now as a recent change of law, apprenticeship programs, undergraduate, and graduate schools, okay? And even beyond graduate schools, because since this presentation was put together, they authorize student loans to be paid for tax-free. So if the student somehow or some family member has student loans, we can deal with that with a 529. We also have the ability now to start with private school as early as kindergarten and take $10,000 out annually for tuition going all the way through 12th grade. So this is really a kindergarten through graduate school type of account, okay? And everyone can participate because there's no income limits or considerations. It doesn't matter how little or how much you make, when you made it, or how much was earned or unearned. Okay, time is off the table as well. I can open it up today, and if I want to close it a week later, open it up today and never close it. There's no requirement I ever take any money out of this account or ever spend it. Age is irrelevant for me as the account owner for the child. And the third name I put on the account, which would be the successor owner, who is the transfer on death. Who gets it when I die? So in 529, we say designated beneficiary. That does not mean who gets the account. That means who may have expenses in the future that I want to prepare for. We have generous contribution limits, okay? Unlike other types of accounts, there's really no limit what I can invest. I can have multiple accounts, but for one account, I can put in more than $500,000 at once or over time. So that's not a concern, okay? And we'll see in a few slides that once we do that, this account is the only type of asset that I can own, and in this case, not only own, but I have daily access, liquidity, and control over it. And yet it is outside my taxable estate. So we never know what the future will bring in terms of taxes, and we never know when we're going to pass away. But this account allows us to have our cake and eat it too, because we have full control in our lifetime, but it's also out of our taxable estate. We have creditor protection available. In other words, this account is not subject to liens, garnishment. If someone wins a judgment against me, they cannot take this account under Texas law. And under the federal bankruptcy code, if it's been invested for 2 years or longer, it's outside the reach of those creditors. So I can sleep well at night knowing my money is safe in this account and not available to creditors of or judgments of any type. I think the biggest objection that people have is not based on an understanding, but a misconception. Because a lot of people say, I don't really want to tie all my money up, some of my money up, a little bit of my money up in this account for the kid. And again, that kid, that what we call in 529 land designated beneficiary, never has any legal right, claim, access, entitlement to that account at any point in time. I, as account owner, always have complete control, and I can decide if I'm going to open it, when, how much I'll put in, what the underlying investment choices will be, how long I'll leave it invested for, who those other two names will be. If I'm going to change those other two names, I can do that any day, every day without any tax cost, penalty, or fee. If I'm going to take the money out, when I'm going to take the money out, and who may benefit when I take that money out. So it's really not about the kid so much. It's about me giving myself an option to use this valuable account tax-free in the future if I want to. And a kid cannot benefit from the account. They can only benefit from convincing us to spend some of our money. And in that way, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about our checking account or 529. Okay. So as we say, assets in the plan can be used tax-free to pay public, private, in-state or out-of-state, community, college, vocational, apprenticeship programs now. There's nearly 500 colleges and universities in Mexico, Canada, Europe, the Far East, outside the US. And then we go on to graduate school, business school, law school. I'm a New York attorney, and I certainly wish that I had a 529 account with me as the beneficiary on it, going through undergraduate and law school. My law school today, for a full-time student, is charging over $90,000. And so you cannot certainly oversave a 529 account. Okay, this chart is beneficial because it basically shows the difference between this and something else getting the same return, all right? So $25,000 over 10 years, because it is a tax-deferred account, I'm gonna end up with more than $7,000 additional funds just for choosing to own my investments in this type of account. So that shows you the basic value of tax-deferred compounding returns. Okay, again, who owns the asset? Who benefits? You, as the account owner, own and control. Okay, and as we say, we have an option, no obligation, to use this money free of federal and state tax. The designated beneficiary, the kid, the current or future student, never has any control. I can change the beneficiary day after I open it. I can close the account. So they can't benefit unless I choose to direct a distribution to them. And the third name, successor owner, that can be anyone or anything. If I want to name my trust that I prepared to go with my will, that can be the owner of this account after I'm gone. So while I'm alive, I've got full control. When I'm gone, I'm controlling from the grave by stipulating in my documents what's to be done with this 529 account. Now, I can open up an account for any person. I don't need to be related. If I have a godchild or a neighbor's kid or a friend's kid and I want to open up an account, I can do that quietly. They don't need to know about it. But if I want to change the beneficiary on it, it needs to be to a family member of that beneficiary. Now, these are long-term accounts by and large, and as we said earlier, we can't predict the future. So it's important for us to have complete control. And, you know, sometimes these accounts don't get used for education. So what are our options as owner? The first option, as we've mentioned, is change the beneficiary to a brother, sister, half brother, stepsister, adopted child, foster child, nephew, niece. If I'm the grandparent, I can switch it from my son's son to my daughter's daughter, who are first cousins, okay? So I can switch it to myself if I'm related. So there's really the opportunity to change the beneficiary any day, every day, without any tax cost, penalty, or fee. Okay, the second option is to do absolutely nothing. I find out that this beneficiary is not ready for school. Maybe they join the Marine Corps, they go away for 4 years. I'm enjoying continued growth of my account through tax-free compounding, taking the wait-and-see strategy. If I don't need the money, don't take it out and stick it in a taxable account. Enjoy the growth. And then when I do take it out for something other than education, I will pay taxes on what I earned, but that puts me in the same boat as, say, an IRA when I start taking distributions. And I may or may not have a penalty of 10% of what I've earned that I'm taking out at that time. So taxes and a penalty of 10% of what I've earned would be my worst case scenario. So we look at this example where our $25,000 has grown over 10 years to $50,000. And we're going to take a $10,000 distribution. Half of our amount withdrawn is a return of what we put in, so that's tax-free. The other half is earnings that would be subject to taxes at ordinary rates, depending on the rate of who gets it. If it's my child or someone else, maybe in a lower bracket, that would be, in our example, 24%, okay, which would be pretty high income earner actually under the current tax code, right? So the earnings component would be 5,000, 10% of that is 500. So we're talking about, when we took out 10,000, $1,700, which is only 17%. So that ends up being a pretty low percentage, okay? Now, there are situations when the penalty of 10% is waived, and that occurs in the case of death, disability, or scholarship of the beneficiary. So if it turns out this is a surprise and there's a scholarship awarded, I can withdraw an amount equal to the scholarship the year that the scholarship's being applied. But we often see those who are fortunate enough to get scholarships for undergraduates, degree programs often go on to graduate school, and it's good to keep the 529 intact because there's less aid available for graduate school, generally speaking. So we have all sorts of qualifying institutions. We have all sorts of expenses, tuition and mandatory fees, books, supplies, equipment required for attendance. So when I retire, I'm going to enroll in Arizona State. I see that they have golf in the fall and tennis in the spring. And so equipment required presumably would be a tennis racket and golf clubs. I could take that money out tax-free. Okay, room and board if I'm half-time, which is generally 12 credits. So I take that golf class, and then I take that Civil War class I was interested in, and I can live off campus and take the money out of my 529 account tax-free to pay room and board at the amount the school publishes, okay? If my student has special needs, I got that covered. And then laptops and printers and software and cost of accessing the internet is all eligible for a tax-free withdrawal. So we've since added up to $10,000 of student loans and apprenticeship programs. So we've got a lot of flexibility here with these 529s. Okay, a lot of flexibility. We've got flexibility and control, low impact on financial aid, and we have freedom from taxation. We have special gifting and estate. And as we say, these accounts can go on forever. If my daughter finishes college, she gets married, starts family of her own, my 529 account is available for my grandchild's education, starting with kindergarten tax-free. So I really like these 529 accounts. As I say, it gives us options, no obligations. And so I quickly went through that presentation. And at this point in time, I am happy to take any questions that people might have. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Kevin, who I think is available for discussion. Kevin?
Yeah, I'm here. Let me get my video turned on and get some questions loaded up. So everybody can go to the bottom bar of their screen. You'll see that you have Q&A, and you can ask a lot of different questions. And as they come in, I'll pass them on to Chris. I'm got my virtual background for the space launch that was supposed to be earlier this week, and now for the weekend, I've got my headset too. Looks like we had our first question come in from Robert Wood. Can you use it for retirement at some age without penalty?
So as we touched on, age is really not a factor at all, but it's important to note that one of the penalty exceptions is disability. And in 529 land, disability is defined as a physical or mental condition that prohibits us from performing substantial gainful functions. So many elderly who aren't able to really do the normal tasks would satisfy that definition. And because it's your own account, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You take the money out and you avoid the penalty. And if you wanted to say, well, it doesn't matter what you do with the proceeds, because if I'm not using it for education, the use of the proceeds is irrelevant. But if I wanted to hire Nancy, who I've known for 30 years, lives 3 doors down, to drive me to the doctor, go shopping for me, whatever I need doing, I certainly have that option to do that with my money. So it's not an age, but it's more of a sort of a disability type of situation that we just described.
That's great. The next question comes from Rachel, and I'm going to kind of preface it real quick, which is there was reform to 529s a few years ago in a congressional bill. And one of the things it allowed them to do was to use the money in there for high school tuition and other earlier than college tuition. So Rachel asked, can you use this to pay for homeschool curriculum or homeschool co-op tuition?
So currently the answer to that is homeschooling expenses are not covered. Senator Ted Cruz fought hard to have this included in the Secure Act. I think it was a few years ago, and it didn't make it. And this discussion united with the coronavirus and stay-at-home orders. But the fact of the matter is, under current law, homeschool expenses are not covered. Many people expect that. Given the situation, there will be a different appetite to move that concept forward in next Congress.
That's great. So Nancy Phillips asked a question, and I'm gonna change it slightly. She asked, is there a minimum deposit limit? And I would actually ask you to kind of expand on a maximum deposit as well. So on two parts. One, if you could talk about the accelerated kind of gifting that can take place, the 5-year rule. And then also, are there limits if we have $200,000, $400,000 in these accounts at some point because they've done so great and grown so well? Are we maxed out at some point?
Right. So in terms of the minimum, every plan is different. Some have none, some have $1,000. Some say if you're signing up for monthly contributions, you can start with as little as $50. So it varies according to the plan. It's not a law of any type. Maximum, the law says that the plan has to ensure that people aren't putting too much in. And so the plan puts a dollar limit, and you can invest, as I said earlier, as much as $500,000 at once or over time. Once the account reaches that in value, you can't invest any more into that one account, but it can grow in depth over time. And given that there is no requirement we ever close or take money out, it could grow to significant figures and be a nice legacy for the next generation. So I think that, that's, again, one of the many flexible features.
All right, we had one person leave a question in the chat, and it's actually something you touched on, but a little bit different. So you mentioned previously that what if you don't use the money for, let's say, kid number 1? Can you then transfer to kid number 2? And you answered that in the affirmative. Steve asked a slightly different question, which is, can you split an existing 529 to a second or more beneficiary?
Yeah, you're able to chop these accounts up among other family members with great flexibility. So, as we touched on, the situation in the future is unpredictable. And I think that's a very important benefit to point out that, 2 kids. Susie gets a scholarship. Jimmy's going to be on the 7-year plan. So I'm going to move some money that Susie doesn't need over to Jimmy's account, or so forth and so on. So we've got all sorts of opportunities there.
That's great. Now, you mentioned some of the technical schools. Can you expand on how far that goes? Kelly Davison asked, what are the restrictions on apprentice programs that would qualify for using 529s?
Yeah, so we speak about technical, vocational, and then most recently apprenticeship program. So apprenticeship program has to be recognized by the Department of Labor as a true apprenticeship program. And so you need to check with DOL on their website to see which programs are so approved. And there are thousands of programs that have been approved. So I think that the equipment and everything that would be covered needed for those programs would be included. But again, the eligible institution for a vocational trade school is, and universities, whether they're domestic or foreign, is with the Department of Education, and the apprenticeship programs with the Department of Labor.
Yeah, so a lot of, I guess we couldn't call it red tape, but definitely a lot of regulatory oversight on the use of the funds to qualify for tax-free status. We have several more questions coming in. We have at least a few more minutes to do this, so if you have any others, definitely put them in either the chat box or the Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer all of them. There's one from Rachel that just came in, which I think is a great question, and one that I know Tom and I get a lot when we're working with clients, which is, should I max out my Roth IRA and my employer's 403B before I contribute to a 529, or is there a percentage of my income that is recommended I set aside for the 529? So before you answer, I would just kind of echo a few things. One is, when it comes to financial planning, retirement can only really be paid for in one way. So you can qualify for Social Security, you can get that, but otherwise it's just their savings. When it comes to 529, specifically using them towards college, there's a lot of ways to pay for college. So Chris alluded to the fact that you can apply for 2 different types of scholarships. You can get merit-based and you can get financial aid. There's also loans that are available. There's working programs once you're on campus. There's a lot of different ways to plan for paying for college. So in a financial planner's perspective, we definitely want to get taken care of retirement one. And then once you have that kind of in a good spot, focusing on 529s. Chris, anything to add on prioritizing as far as goals of retirement versus education, or a percentage of income to spend on education?
Yeah, I totally disagree with what you said, Kevin. No, I'm only kidding.
That sounds great. Let's get into it.
I totally agree. Your retirement is most important. If you think putting all your money into a 529, educating your kid, if they're educated, they're going to be smart enough to know that they're not going to take care of you when you're old and retired. So make sure you've got your retirement account funded. And I'm the country's leading cheerleader of 529, but I will acknowledge that. Now, having said that, it's important to talk to your advisor, because, the reality is that college costs often come years before retirement. And so you do need to figure out the proper allocation based on your particular situation, but definitely don't shortchange your retirement account if you can avoid it.
Yeah, so the other 2 questions that are in there, you kind of touched on about estate planning strategies, and we have a lot of information we can share with clients on that, as well as strategies on gifting as far as maximum and pulling things forward, which you mentioned a few minutes ago. I'd kind of ask one last question, which is, in Texas, we don't have a state income tax. So that allows us to pick anyone without having to sacrifice the state income tax deduction. Why would we choose, for example, the Columbia Threadneedle, I know, is based out of South Carolina. What makes one state better than another? Is there any kind of benchmarking or any rankings where we can find that this state's got the best 529 or this one's the worst?
Well, again, these are investments. So you guys are pretty diligent on the investments vehicles that you use and recommend for clients. And 529s have been around for 20 years, and they definitely have a track record. They do get changed fairly often. These are state programs. They enter into a contract that could be 3 or 4 or 5 years, or it could be 30 years with a particular company. So there are some changes. But they are investments, and you want to look at 529 plans, especially as you point out, Kevin, without a state tax consideration for the plan that addresses your needs and concerns. Low expenses, a lot of choices, good performance ultimately, right? Expenses are just one component of the return that it delivers for the account owner. Flexibility. You know, the Columbia plan has like 12 different investment managers instead of sinking all your money in an investment firm. You know, you're not hopefully giving all your retirement money to one firm to handle the actual investment, and 529 may not be or should not be much different. If you want to make sure that you and your spouse together own it, the Columbia plan offers that as well. So there's a lot of different considerations. You can see all these factors at my company, savingforcollege.com. We have information on every single 529 plan. We update it daily, and including performance, whether it offers things like creditor protection, so forth and so on. You did touch on, you know, gifting and estate planning. I spoke to it very briefly. I can tell you that the reason why this account, this asset is outside your taxable estate is because it is considered a gift to that designated beneficiary. And this is where we have a lot of people getting confused, because on the one hand, the tax law where the accountants and the IRS live say that we're gifting it to the beneficiary on the account. In the real world, where I hope and believe we all live, this is an account that we own and have daily access, liquidity, and control over. So it's kind of a contradiction, but it's actually the best of both worlds. So I've gifted it out of my estate. Because it's considered a gift, I'm subject to the gift tax rules. Current gift tax rules say that you can give anybody and everybody $15,000 each year. 529 is a special rule that says we'll give you a loan in addition to the current year, 2020, your $15,000. We'll give you a loan of 4 future years. So I can gift all the way out to 2024 or use my 2024 annual exclusion for a total of 5. And if I'm married, and of course there's no requirement you be happily married, that would be twice that amount, $150,000. So I could invest in one afternoon just using my annual exclusion, $150,000 into one account. And then I can do that for as many accounts as I want with different beneficiaries on it. But in addition to that annual exclusion, we have our unified lifetime credit that's currently over $11.5 million. So if I took $175,000 and $175,000 from my spouse's $11.5 million unified credit, that would be $350 together with my $150. That's how in one day I've invested tax-free $500,000 in this tax-deferred investment account. So that's why I say we've got a lot of flexibility and opportunity on investing in one 529 account because the policymakers want to make sure you get going, take advantage of this. Time, amount, and rate of return are the 3 factors that determine how prepared you'll be. So time means that we want to start ASAP. Rate of return means we want a good performing plan, and amount is up to your individual situation. So that's how we take advantage. And of course, since there's no requirement the account ever close, as I mentioned earlier, if we name our trust as the next owner, the successor owner transfer on death, then that account can go on for multiple generations. And if you don't believe me, just check back in 50 years.
That's pretty good. We did have a follow-up question come from an anonymous attendee, and it was actually something on my mind as you were speaking as well, which is when it comes to the estate planning part of it, I believe, and you can confirm or deny this, that if you do use the 5-year kind of fast forward and who had done that passed away in year 2, that some of that gets clawed back and included in the estate. And then if you could follow that up and just explain the proper as not includable assets.
And funding the account is when you are removing the assets from your taxable estate, even though you've got complete control over this account. So again, there are 3 names. You're listed as the account owner or full control. You've identified a potential future student who has no rights, shouldn't even know the account exists, if you ask me. And then the third name is what you want to give consideration. Who should get this when I die? If it's a lot of money, you might not feel comfortable naming another family member who, might be subject to the whims of their situation at the time. Maybe you want to name a trust. If it's not a lot of money, it may not matter as much. So you could name the parent or whomever. But, I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that they've actually done something for a child or grandchild because they really haven't done anything. They've made no commitment or created any obligation. But yet, having said that, they should feel good of giving themselves an option or opportunity to do something for the grandchildren. So on the one hand, they've never given it away, which is important, especially for grandparents who may believe they could use or need to use the money down the road. And because it remains their money, they can always do so. But they also have the opportunity to fund tax-free educational expenses, again, starting with first grade or so, if that's what they want to do. So again, great legacy tool. If properly explained to grandparents, I don't know too many who would be reluctant to take advantage of it.
That's great. So we have one last question, and then after that's done, Tom, I'll let you close. So if you want to put the video back on. The last question came from Susie, and she wanted to know what the maximum rate of return seen from 529 plans are. My first comment on that, well, it just depends on how your account is invested, and it's probably going to mirror whatever the market's done. These funds aren't ones where you're going to be investing in individual stocks. It's going to be mostly mutual funds or look like market indices. So it's going to have comparable returns to that. Chris, do I have that answer pretty close to right, or completely wrong?
Kevin, you're coming along nicely. Development. You're absolutely right. They're market returns, and so like in the Columbia plan, you have a guaranteed, an FDIC insured option, and for 10 years they have been really very, very low interest rates. Their principal is guaranteed, but you're seeing very low returns on that. On the other hand, if you had invested in a large cap growth option, you're seeing returns in excess of 30%. They're not guaranteed, but those account owners have actually experienced that. So to your point, these are market returns, and it depends on how you participate in the market. Large cap growth, small cap, international, short-term bond, whatever it is, that's what you'll enjoy or suffer. When we have events like the coronavirus that adversely impacted the markets, because these are investments, not savings accounts. Clients do savings, you guys do the investments.
Well, we almost made it the whole thing without mentioning the coronavirus, so I'll let Tom close us out from here. Thank you, Chris, for being here today. Appreciate all your Q&A and the presentation.
I think thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. I think the next webinar is going to be Kevin actually telling us how to get planet Earth as the background on our screen. I've never seen that before.
Just this little arrow down there, and you get a virtual background. They have you hanging out on a beach. You can be in San Francisco. You can be in the Aurora Borealis. And then you can actually get your own stuff too. So if you have a favorite meme or just some funny photo, you can have that. So
we'll have to check that out. One last thing before I thank Chris formally. If you have a Coverdell plan, that is not the same thing as a 529, and reach out to your advisor. There's options to roll that Coverdell into a 529, which will usually grant it more flexibility. But I just wanted to make that last comment there. Chris, thank you very much for that. That was really insightful. We're going to post this on our website and online. So if you missed any of it or you want to rewatch it, it'll be on our website. Again, we have our next webinar, which will be June 26th. So make sure to check that out. Thank you for everyone for attending. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Thanks again. Have a great